Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Kamangavarshaṃ parjanya sarvakama dukhamani shishitchu sma prajandavan. What's the next one? Payasod pasvatir muda. Yeah. So we read this morning, as many of you are aware of this. We already read this. We can. We read now again with the purport, and I'd like you to listen very carefully this time to the purport, and just consider who speaks or writes like this. Srila Prabhupada is unique in his social commentary. There are many writers who give their perspectives on human society, but Srila Prabhupada's angle is completely unique. Yeah, it is from the angle of the absolute truth. He points out the defect of the democratic system. Persons less than, people are just like animals, vote for someone who's less than an animal. Who writes like this? And Srila Prabhupada gives the solution for a better society. Simple living and high thinking. And high thinking means Krishna consciousness. So simple living and high thinking. And I just said high thinking means Krishna consciousness. It's important to note that Krishna consciousness means high thinking, because it is possible to chant Hare Krishna throughout your life and remain in actually quite poor, low consciousness. We see practically some people chant Hare Krishna, but they remain, it's tangible in low consciousness. So we can say, well, that's being very critical. But Shastra teaches us to see that there are different levels of devotees and learn how to interact with, associate with them accordingly. And that we can chant, that we can superficially go through the process of Krishna consciousness and not make very solid advancement is stated in Shastra and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Bahujanma kare jadi shravan kirtan tapu ta napai Krishna pade premadhan. The warning is there that we can go through many lifetimes of apparently engaging in Krishna consciousness, still not attain the result of that, which is love of Krishna. So, out of simple living and high thinking, the important part is high thinking. If one has high thinking, even if one is living in this very complex modern society, that is desirable. That is desirable compared to someone who is living simply but is not Krishna conscious. So this simple living is for creating a favorable situation for Krishna consciousness, so that devotees can spend much time to engage in the direct activities of Krishna consciousness as compared to the very limited time which most grihastas do nowadays. That is the payback that you get. You may lose so many comforts and this and that, but you have the opportunity to directly engage in Krishna consciousness a lot of the time. But even materially speaking, benefits are there also. One is freed from the worst effects of city life, such as air pollution, food pollution, water pollution. In English, they also talk about noise pollution. In other words, there's so many noises. And not that nature is silent. Sometimes you may be in the country, at least in India, you can be woken up in the middle of the night by peacocks making a lot of noise. But at least that's a more pleasing sound than the sound of belching trucks. Okay, getting back to the points that Srila Prabhupada summarizes in this important purport, all the problems of modern society are created by modern society. So many inventions are made to enhance the quality of life and to solve various problems. Just like, for instance, we may think, well, to walk from one place to another takes a long time, so let's have a motor car, invent the motor car. And then so many problems come with a motor car, such as air pollution, noise pollution, traffic jams. One time I tried in New York, in Manhattan, in New York City. We thought we'd go from one place to another by taxi. After 10 minutes, we'd gone about 50 meters, and we found it quicker to walk. Even the most prestigious city, in the most prestigious country, they have the perennial problem of traffic jams. And then if we think more and more about the problems, well, all the pollution of the environment by making mines to take out the iron ore and then extract it and make iron and smelt it and make it into steel. So much pollution, so much ugra karma, and then you have to pay for it, but you have to work hard to get money to pay for it. Due to planned obsolescence, you find that after a few years it's just like a tin can that these rich people say put tomatoes in, canned tomatoes. It has
the car.
Yeah, it doesn't function as a car anymore. So it's a classic example of what is described in Srimad Bhagavatam, of someone is feeling the pain of carrying a heavy weight on one shoulder, so they solve the problem by moving it to the other shoulder. This problem is not solved. It's just, and in modern life, for each problem we solve, we seem to create more and more problems. For all the so-called progress, man seems to be more unhappy than at any time in known history. The birds get up in the morning and they start to sing. They don't worry where is food coming from. Man gets up and immediately, I have to rush off to work. From the moment he wakes up, he's in anxiety. He goes to work, he's afraid, I may lose my job. You may be working in a company for 20 years, doing your job very dutifully, and one day they say, bye-bye. That's unemployment. There's always the fear of losing one's employment. You may keep money in the bank thinking that, well, if I lose my job, at least I'll have some savings. But as you all discovered recently in Russia, the value of money can just half overnight practically. If people have the same amount of money in the bank, it's the same written down, but you can only get half the value from it as you could previously. And it's a whole society of anxiety because everything is so uncertain. And parents infuse this into their children from their very birth. They infuse into them the idea that, it's a very uncertain future, so you have to struggle with your education practically from age 2 or 3. Maybe it's not so crazy in Russia, but in India, they begin education practically at age 2 or 3. I guess in some ways India is more advanced than Russia. Advanced, it's considered advanced the more you have absorbed the materialistic culture. But from the beginning, the children are infused with the idea, you have to have a good education, otherwise you won't get a good job. Unless you have a university degree, then you have no future, or only a very bleak future. But if you go to college, then you have a bright future. That will bring you a successful life. You can distinguish yourself. You can be happy. What happened in Britain is that nowadays practically all the kids go to university, 90% of them. So it doesn't give you any advantage to have a university degree, because everyone has one. And in America, every year there are thousands of young people who leave university with a university degree, but they begin their working life with a huge debt. How much is that value? At least $50,000. $200,000. $200,000.
No, it's $50,000 per year.
$50,000. That's for the education, and there's the boarding and everything else. $200,000 debt, and then they have to get a house and a car, and more debt and more debt. So it's not funny. They're really suffering. What happened in America was that so many people, they bought houses, taking loans, and then the property market crashed, so that they have to go on paying the old price, but the home they live in is no longer worth what they're paying for. So they're really just cheated. So the whole idea that you have to go to college to get a bright future, well, it's not at all guaranteed. The idea is that, well, only if you have a degree, then you have the right to earn money in larger quantities. But no one is thinking about the right to produce, to make things. Production is in the hands of a few people who oversee the massive agri-food business. There's no local carpenter to make chairs. It's all mass-produced. And even until recently, you may not even, if you need a chair, you may not even go to a carpenter. Just many men could just make it themselves.
When?
Until recently, probably in Russia, isn't it?
Yes.
But nowadays everything is more complex. You have to get a degree to get a job, to buy things which previously people would produce many of the things themselves. It's so crazy. I see in the villages in India, people come around on motorbikes with baskets selling vegetables. People go grow cash crops, such as cotton, peanuts, tobacco, spices, individual spices, and then they purchase vegetables which they could very easily grow with their own need, what they need for themselves. Srila Prabhupada spoke about this when he went to Mauritius. He said that the whole island, the whole agricultural land is for growing sugar cane, I believe. I haven't been there. And they export that, and they import vegetables, which they bring. It's an island, and they import vegetables from overseas, which they could very well grow themselves. So Srila Prabhupada, he didn't only talk directly about Krishna consciousness and how to advance and chanting. He also pointed out these anomalies in human society. And again he gave the solution. Just forget this whole complex society. Live simply. Simple living, high thinking. The modern society is dead end. Dead end. It means just is hopeless, it goes nowhere. A dead end literally means you go down a road and then you find at the end of it there's a wall and you can't go anywhere. So it doesn't go, the road doesn't go anywhere. A dead end means a road, you come to the end of a road, it doesn't go anywhere. It seems like you're going somewhere, but you don't go anywhere. It can't take you anywhere. Now, if I said this 50 years ago, modern society is at a dead end, many people would agree. If I said it 100 years ago, many people would agree. 100 years ago, what is now called the First World War was raging. They didn't call it the First World War until they had the Second World War. And still historians are wondering, why did they have a war for? They can't even understand why they had a great war. What were the political reasons? It was just, why? The answer is samsara davanava. The material world is like a forest fire. No one goes to set it ablaze, but somehow or other it just blazes. So 100 years ago, many people would say, yes, society is a complete chaos. We need some solution. In one of his early Back to Godhead magazines, which Srila Prabhupada was producing before he came to the West, he made some comments in this regard. This was shortly after the end of the Second World War. And Srila Prabhupada was quoting various eminent personalities of the world who were reflecting, why did we have such a terrible war? And Srila Prabhupada quoted one man from what was called the moral rearmament movement. Rearmament, that word means that, well, you already finished all your weapons in the war, so we need to get more arms. Not these arms, but these arms. Bombs and tanks and all kinds of things. Nowadays they have drones and intercontinental ballistic missiles and all kinds of things. So there was a movement, I guess I must be been in England and America, which is saying that, no, instead of building up our armies again, we should build up our moral character. And some people were saying, no, now we need to be more religious. This war couldn't have happened if we were really religious, we were really concerned with God. So every so often there's some major chaotic happening in human society, and then people start to think, oh, what did we do wrong? We should become good and moral and religious. But soon they forget it, being attracted by sense gratification. Then by sense gratification they engage in all sinful activities. Then by sinful activities they get the result in the form of a big war. And then they start to think, oh, we should not be sinful, we should be good. And it goes on in cycles like this. Throughout all these cycles, there is an arrow, a cycle, and then an arrow going through it all. We could analyze sociologically of technological development. And modern technology has brought the promise of more and more ways of sophisticatedly enjoying the senses. Nowadays there's a worldwide phenomenon which we didn't see 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, of people, whenever they get a spare moment, their head is down like this. Their hand is held like this, and they're looking at their smartphone or iPhone or iPod or whatever it is, doing something like this with their fingers. And it may be that many people, the first thing they do in the morning when they wake up, I have slept so many hours. Oh, they're psychologically addicted to it. So that if they were deprived of that, they would suffer withdrawal symptoms, like a heroin addict who's deprived from heroin. Anyway, dozens of books could be written about how the problems of modern society. And practically in purports like this, Srila Prabhupada summarizes the whole situation. To put it succinctly, modern society is insane. But it's not just a problem of modern society, it's a problem of the whole human condition in this material world. As Lord Rishabdev describes, Nunam pramatah kurute vikarma yat indriya pritiya aprinoti na sadhu manye yata atmanoyam vasannapi kleshada asadeha. He says that people are certainly insane who perform sinful activities for the sake of getting sense gratification. This is not a good idea, he says, because it causes them to get born again and again and to suffer again and again. So we can say that the modern materialistics that is more insane than previous societies, because there's more emphasis on sense gratification. And apart from the problems caused by getting born again and again, it creates so many problems right in this world right now. In the name of progress, modern society is creating problems which simply didn't exist previously. I gave some examples, the problems of various kinds of pollution, problem of anxiety and insecurity due to lack of security and employment, all kinds of psychoses and neuroses which didn't exist before. So in America, it's very common for people to talk about my psychologist, as if it's normal that everyone has one. Everyone who can afford one has a psychologist. Well, there weren't such people previously. It's a new profession. And a lot of time I think that it's a kind of egoism. You go to this where you can just go, one person who's paid to listen to you talk about yourself. Other people are not interested in listening. And the psychologist probably isn't also, but he gets money for doing so. And what to speak of terrible wars. A few years ago, people were living in Syria, fairly peaceful lives. People would get up like so many other people in the world, they get up in the morning, get their kids off to school, go to work. Now the whole country is just a complete hell. It can happen anywhere, anytime. It could well be. We don't think it's likely, but it's just the nature of karmic reactions in this world that there could be a major war or bombing or civil unrest in Nizhny Novgorod in a very short time. It's just the way material nature works. There's no security anywhere. So, of course, it's not that in traditional societies there weren't problems. The very nature of this material world is problems. But we can confidently say that the more complex and so-called advanced societies, the more problems exist, both at the individual level and at the social level, the national level. There was a time when people in Nizhny Novgorod had nothing to fear from people in Washington, D.C. But with the progress of technology, people's mentality hasn't progressed. They're still in the mentality of conquering others, and so someone in Washington, D.C. at some point might just press a button and goodbye Nizhny Novgorod. Just a few days ago,
Несколько дней
in
назад
the British Parliament, House of Commons, an MP, Member of Parliament, asked
член парламента
the
спросил
new Prime Minister, Theresa May, that, you see, just like David Cameron, he didn't expect to lose his job. He did. There's another example, even a big man like him. If you don't know, David Cameron is the preceding Prime Minister. He just had to resign his job a few days ago. So anyway, in the House of Commons, an MP asked Theresa May that, would you give the order to send a nuclear missile which would kill 100,000 innocent people? And unhesitatingly and very clearly she said, yes. This is the world we're living in today. Well, it's frightening, isn't it? Take shelter of Krishna. The fearless lotus feet of Krishna. So anyway, the point I'm just trying to illuminate by giving a few examples of how we live in a world that has exacerbated and multiplied the problems which are inherent in material life. So, sitting here discussing this purport of Srila Prabhupada's, we can't imagine how we can just change the whole world and make it very nice. There are many sentimental poets who think that simply by their good wishes they can change the world. For instance, the sentimental poet John Lennon, who some of you may have heard of. He was such a big famous man, but soon he'll be forgotten like so many big famous men. They become forgotten in the course of time. So he sung, "All you need is love." And the song goes on like that. All you need is love. All you need is love. And they sing that a few times, and then just to make variety, they say, love is all you need. Of course, he made millions of dollars by singing that, so he got more than love. Then another of his songs was, give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. And he made another song called Imagine. I can't remember the words exactly. It's like learning shlokas. You remember some, but you can't remember all of them very well. Of course, it's easy to remember. All you need is love. All you need is love. It doesn't require very high brain power to remember. Anyway, this song, Imagine, it was imagine all the people living for today. That's one line I remember. So imagine a world in which there's no, I can't remember. Religion. That was one of the things. I'm going to come to that. There's no wars, and there's no governments, and no religion too. So he painted this utopian picture. Why can't we all be happy and nice together? You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope one day you'll join us, and the world will live as one. So very nice, sentimental song with no practical idea of how to effect all this. Despite being famous and very wealthy, John Lennon was a very unhappy person, and a heroin addict. And one day he met a person who decided not to give peace a chance, who shot him dead. So you may wonder what we're going to do discussing all these things, sitting here. If even such a great person as John Lennon couldn't contribute anything more to the peace of the world than resting in peace. Well, this is a very practical program. One thing is, if we live in the villages, we're less likely to get hit by nuclear missiles unless the computer systems don't work properly. No, that's directing them.
Yeah.
But even then, it's a very small chance because we could end up, the nuclear missile could end up in the Lake Baikal or something like that. Baikal. And another major problem that's causing fear to people all over the world is that of terrorism. At any place, at any time, you can just be bombed to pieces or machine gunned or whatever. But this is much less likely to happen in small communities, because it's when people gather together in large numbers, then the terrorism can be more effective. So, I was talking about how can we be so confident that we can do anything to change the world. Well, Srila Prabhupada had that ambition. He already did change the world in a major way by introducing the chanting of Hare Krishna all over the world. And he left to his followers the task of demonstrating a better way of life, simple living and high thinking. By following the way of life given by Krishna and living in blissful Krishna consciousness, we can show people how they can live simply and happily. In traditional life, there are no problems of unemployment. There's no problem of caring for the aged people. It's a major problem in many countries, just like Japan, where the populations are aging. And the money that they put in there, that they were taken from them, whereas they were working for their pension fund, is already used up by the governments. And the government has the idea that, well, we'll use up their money and later we can fulfill their pensions by the younger people's taxes. But in the meantime, they had been encouraging people not to have so many children, so as not to over-increase the population. So there's a large elderly population which a small younger population are supposed to support by their taxes. Nor are there sufficient nurses and medical facilities to support so many old people. But in traditional societies, people care for their old people, their aged parents at home. People don't spend huge amounts of money taking loans to try to prolong their life. In India, it's a common thing among middle-class people. The old father or mother, it looks like they're going to die, they rush them off to hospital. They die anyway, but they die and you have an extra 2 lakh debt. Because for taking them to the hospital, they run up so many medical bills. Recently, I was in India and one of my disciples in another part of India phoned me and said, "Oh, my father is dying." He was about 80 years old. He said he's in the intensive care unit in the hospital, but they say he won't live more than 5 or 6 days. So I told him to take him out of the hospital and keep him at home and have chanting going on 24 hours with him. People think, no, you have to put him in the hospital, tubes in and injections and wires. Otherwise you're not looking after your parents properly. But anyway they're going to die. And in the hospital they won't let you have 24-hour kirtan going on. And you end up with 2 lakhs extra debt. For what? For nothing. In India it's become such a thing. Anyone has a little headache or they scratch their finger, immediately rush them off to the hospital. or to the doctor. Yeah. So the doctor looks at them, gives some prescription, it's probably some placebo, and charges you 1,000 rupees. But they think, you see, he scratched his finger. You have to take him to the doctor, otherwise you're not looking after him properly. Of course, I don't know anything about Russian herbs, but I'm pretty sure if you get a cut on your finger, your grandmother would know which herb to put on your finger, so that it heals very quickly. Nowadays you have to go to the hospital, get an x-ray, get this test, that test, another test, all kinds of medicines. One thing, you have to give some credit to these demons. They're very intelligent extracting your money. Intelligent, but it's misused intelligence. In traditional society, there is housing for all. That was achieved in the communist time also. Everyone had somewhere to live, even if it was some tiny little apartment which looks completely, from the outside looks completely horrible, but at least they had a place to live. But in the money-centered economy, if you don't have money, then you don't have a place to live. And you'll find many people, they simply live they sleep at night under a bridge or in their car. There are many people who they may be living under a bridge like this, and they may tell you that, well, I had a good job, I was earning $300,000 a year, and then suddenly I lost my job, and at my age I can't get a new job. So that I couldn't keep up the payments on the house, so the bank took it over. So I was living in a big house with a big income, and now I'm nothing. It's a very cruel society which allows people or allows such a situation where if they don't have money, then they can just freeze on the street. Has that started in Russia now? Now you've switched to a money-based economy? People without homes?
A lot.
Many, huh?
Yes.
How do they live in the winter? It's so cold.
Как они зимуют? Где они живут зимой?
Oh, pipes. And he slept.
I see.
In the basements of these buildings. Blocks of flats, they have basements with all these pipes, and some of them, not many, but some of them.
freeze to death also, probably.
Yes.
Well, if they are drunk, of course.
At least in India, until recently, in the country still, there are no people without houses. The house might be made of straw and mud, but it's functional. It keeps out the rain and the cold and the heat or whatever. So living simply, it solves many problems. You're not going to be burgled if you don't have anything burglarable, if there's such a word. And another thing, if everyone in the community, they all know each other, then they're not going to steal from each other. Rather, the spirit is to share God's bounty with others. If you have more fruit on your tree than you can use, then you just give some to your friends. That's all. It's not that every apple you're calculating, this one is worth so many rubles. The natural spirit of sharing with others. So, although life in this material world is problematic, living simply helps to keep the problems simple. Instead of thinking how to solve so many big problems, you just live simply, chant Hare Krishna. And chanting Hare Krishna with high thinking, that means the deliberate effort to become purified, then we solve the real problems, the greatest problems, which are birth, death, old age and disease. When we can understand this, then our mind will no longer be our worst enemy. Udhared atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayat atmaiva atmano bandhur atmaiva ripur atmanaha. Krishna says, one should elevate himself by the mind and not degrade himself. The mind can be the greatest friend or the greatest enemy. So if we're attached to the modern society and the hope of sense gratification that it gives, then we're allowing our mind to be our worst enemy. It's the society of enmity. Everyone works against their own real self-interest, which is to become self-realized. And everyone acts in a way which is harmful to others. Even the parents' genuine concern for their children, due to their lack of knowledge, means that they place the children, they practically become the enemy of their children. Therefore they push them into the society. Work hard, get a job, earn money. There is a saying, man is the architect of his own fortune. So we're making our own misery in unlimited ways. We're increasing the adhyatmic klesh, the problems caused by our own body and mind. We find in modern life that so many people, they're just physically unfit. We find young people, 20 years old, and their bodies are just so unhealthy. They're mentally so disturbed also. So adhyatmic klesh, adipotic klesh, miseries from other living beings. Everyone is, by the nature of the competitive society, people are inflicting miseries on others. And adidaivic klesh, natural disasters. People are drilling the earth and upsetting the whole balance of nature. They're going against nature, so nature responds by giving earthquakes and tsunamis and droughts and floods and all kinds of things. So we say, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. But if we're to be truly happy by chanting Hare Krishna, we have to understand that the happiness offered by this insane materialistic society is not happiness at all. It creates more and more misery. But somehow we have it in our head that, I can be happy by more money and prestige and all these things. Just like that example, after the First World War, after the Second World War, many leaders of society were thinking, we became too materialistic, we should become more religious. And then they forgot it all in a short time. Or you get some well-intentioned person like John Lennon who talks about peace and love, but he has no idea how to live his life happily. He's a drug addict. So there's something basically wrong with our whole concept of how to be happy. If we tell people, you live simply, grow your own food and chant Hare Krishna, they'll think, that's crazy. You have to be a good citizen, respectable person, have a good job. And that is the proper way to live. This idea of going to the land, it's backward, it's a step backwards. Society has made so much progress, why do you want to step backwards? It's a foolish idea. You're becoming primitive. You're just going back to Stone Age men going around with clubs and hitting others on the head. Well, if we accept the idea of Stone Age men hitting each other on their heads with clubs, then we can say they're probably a lot better off than modern man who kills thousands at one time with a missile. It's safer to be a Stone Age man. Yeah. But of course we don't accept all this Darwinian biological evolutionary theory. In our history we know that there's greatly civilized people. We have in the Bhagavatam dynasties of very civilized kings. We have a vision in the Gita and the Bhagavatam of a highly sophisticated society which knew that the ultimate goal of life is spiritual realization. And through the vision of the Bhagavatam also we can understand that this whole society from top to bottom is just producing misery. There are many verses in Gita and Bhagavatam which point out the whole mistake of materialistic civilization. For instance, from Bhagavad Gita, Yehi samsparshata bhoga dukha yonya evataya dhamtavanta kauntayana teshu ramate buddha. The happiness that derives from the contact of the senses with their sense objects simply produces misery even before you, just in the contemplation, in the act of doing, and in the ongoing result. Therefore, an intelligent person doesn't take part in it. That makes sense, doesn't it? If something produces misery, then you're intelligent, you don't do that thing. But we're so conditioned to think that happiness comes from interacting the senses with the sense objects in a certain way. Just like a classic case which I've come across many, many times. The brahmachari or the unmarried man is very desirous of sexual enjoyment. So he marries. Then after some time he says, again meeting, he says, actually sexual enjoyment is not much, not really enjoyable. I say, I know, it's there in the Gita, it's there in the Bhagavatam, and it's there on the faces of pretty much everyone in the world. Pretty much everyone in this world is having sex, and they don't look at all happy. But for the ex-brahmachari, it's a great revelation, which he couldn't understand simply by hearing it. And people who don't have the culture of hearing Gita and Bhagavatam, they never understand it. They go on thinking, yes, there must be some enjoyment there. Srila Prabhupada sometimes spoke about 80-year-old men paying large sums of money to go to a nightclub in Paris where they would see naked women. The shocking story, well, one of the shocking stories he told, of the Muslim Emperor Akbar and his minister Birbal. I think Prabhupada didn't use those names exactly. And Akbar asked his minister, then, how long in life does sexual desire continue? The minister replied, up to the point of death.